My name is Amelia Goa. I am a security consultant with TrustWave, though in this case, I'm actually not representing TrustWave. I am essentially representing myself on this call. Thank you so much to TechIO for having me here and enabling this session. So I'm essentially going to be talking about the future of cybersecurity in form of a specific technology, emerging technology called Deepfakes. I'd actually prepared a couple of slides to share with you, but due to technological issues, it's not working very well. So I'll just speak, and later on we can have a discussion or a conversation as you prefer. So deepfakes, welcome to the 21st century, where we don't exactly have flying cars just yet, but we now have an alternative to Photoshop. Who really needs Photoshop when we have deepfakes? It's more lifelike, a wilder degree of pointed accuracy, and several channels for application, not just with video and audio as well. But let's step back a bit here. What are we really talking about, and what's the fuss? I'm glad you asked, because I'm just as curious as you are. Deepfakes are essentially synthetic audios and videos created by artificial intelligence-powered applications. They derive their input from real faces and voices and transpose them into lifelike versions, the output being a forgery or imitation or replication or knockoff image or audio or video of someone. The word deepfake is a combination of deep learning and fake. So put together, that essentially makes up the deepfake. The earliest applications of it can be traced as far back as the 90s, when Hollywood used some form of machine learning to edit and alter the appearance of individuals in some movies. So this has evolved quite rapidly, especially since 2014, when we had the development and usage of innovative new deep learning methods like the generative adversarial networks, which is essentially the foundation that deepfakes now sits on. The technology is not really new. It's actually gaining a bit more notoriety now for several reasons. The first one being visibility. Essentially, social media has amplified everything that previously went undocumented. The second reason is accessibility. There are tons of applications now that are available to the public that can be used to create deepfakes. And while it's not a simple thing to do, it's not exactly out of reach. So examples of these applications are Reface and Jig, where you can essentially transpose your face onto a celebrity's face or transform a GIF or GIF, depending on who you're talking to and how they pronounce that. And you can also create your own smaller memes with it. Then the third reason is that technology community is quite generous. So the machine learning community essentially values its open source ethos. And whenever there's a research advance in the generative modeling, when it occurs, the technology is made available for free for anyone in the world to download and experiment with. As with anything that's an emerging technology, it does start with great intentions to ease communication, productivity, interaction, etc. And at the same time, there are people waiting in the shadows to figure out how to exploit it. As a newer technology, that also means that it's not regulated just yet, but it remains ripe for abuse. That is, until a group of experts sitting in a fancy villa in the Swiss Alps, sipping on some mulled wine, figure out how to manage its use and perhaps spit out a standard or framework that's designed to assist with the technology's adoption and regulation. But this is not an uncommon theme across any emerging technology. It evolves quite quickly. And when it's done a Speedy Gonzales around the world, laws and regulations are just putting their sneakers on to join the race. So let's look at the use cases so far. How have deepfakes been used? Quick example, fancy birthday presents. Think Kanye West giving Kim Kardashian a hologram of her father, speaking to her as a birthday gift. He essentially used Robert Kardashian's likeness and voice to develop the video, where he essentially wished his daughter a happy birthday and told her all the things that a proud father would. Obviously, the script for the speech was written by Kanye himself, and there are a few anecdotes in there that are evidence of that. The second example, entertainment. Now famous TikToker early in the year called Chris essentially fooled everyone into thinking that a partner that he was working with was Tom Cruise. Of course, TikTok is all fun and games, and many saw it for what it was. Plus, disclaimers come in handy when you don't want to get sued. But many also marveled about how real the video looked. Then you have the Hollywood and celebrity factor. A few instances here using holograms in concerts. It's a bit weird and eerie, but it works. But it's their voices that you're paying to hear after all. And more recently, or something that could resonate with you, the use of Paul Walker's face overlaid with his brother when they wanted to shoot the final scenes of Fast and Furious 7. So how else might it come in handy in the future? Conferences and networking such as these. Now that we're working in a remote environment, attending conferences could become a lot easier. There'd be no need to take a flight halfway around the world to do it. All you'd have to do is deploy a deepfake and you can deliver your keynote speech or presentation that way. It's lifelike and ideally it could work. Entertainment as well, this will continue to evolve. Documentaries about figures past, for example, Anthony Bourdain, for those of you who used to follow him, his likeness has been used extensively to now develop a new documentary about his life. And more realistic movie graphics as well are going to be a result of this. So rumor is that Chadwick Boseman's likeness, the actor who famously played in Black Panther and passed away from cancer last year, he could also make a return in a sequel using deepfakes. Obviously, there's no real news coming out of that, but that's just speculation. Then on the darker side of the coin, we have the use of political figures to spread fake news and propaganda and create chaos, especially around election time. For example, images that circulated of a seemingly drunk Nancy Pelosi. These were really well-spliced images and videos put together in an attempt to discredit her. An even wilder example of political chaos instigated by deepfakes is from a country called Gabon in West Africa. In late 2018, Gabon's president had not been seen in public for months, Ali Bongo. So rumors started going around that he was critically ill or even worse, dead. So to try and put people at ease, the government and his administration announced that he would address the nation via a televised address on New Year's Day. In the video address, the president seemed stiff and stilted, had some unnatural speech, wonky facial expressions, and that video immediately made people really suspicious of the government, and they were accused of concealing something from the public. Everyone thought something was wrong with the president. So the president's political opponents declared that the footage was a deep fake and that the president was dead. So because rumors of that deep fake conspiracy spread like wildfire on social media, the political situation in Gabon rapidly deteriorated. Within a week, the military had launched a coup, the first in the country since 1964, citing the New Year's video obviously as proof that something had happened to the president. After that, well, nobody could tell whether the video was true or not. The country essentially stabilized But that was the effect: mayhem and chaos. The second point on the darker side of the coin is the development of child sexual abuse material. So most deepfake videos are currently on porn sites, and the creators of these videos basically take celebrities and private citizens and slap their faces onto videos of random people. It's non-consensual, obviously, and women are mostly the targets. So now the boundaries of things like revenge porn are much wider. But in the same vein, there are images of children that are taken to create child sexual abuse material, something which organizations and law enforcement around the world are already fighting tooth and nail to stop. So again, this pushes the boundaries for what can be done with the technology. And then you also have distortion of public accounts of events. Deepfakes could be used to deepen conspiracy theories around events that will go on to shape or reshape history as we know it. So events around the abuse of human rights, man-made or natural disasters, evoking debates on climate change, these are within sights too. And instead of focusing on addressing the global issues at hand, the relevant parties are stuck in a loop debating what exists or existed and what did not. So whether the videos are real or not is almost besides the point. The larger lesson is that the emergence of deepfakes will make it increasingly difficult for the public to distinguish between what is real and what is fake. And this is a situation that will inevitably be exploited. So what are my concerns as a member of the cybersecurity community? One, that this technology could be used to run cons and scams. Think of spear phishing on steroids. This is a totally new level, and we're already seeing some evidence of early use of this. Spear phishing is a form of social engineering, and essentially a malicious actor could call you to pretend to be a relative or a colleague and use a forged video or audio to convince you to wire that person money or buy gift cards or propel you to do some other kind of urgent request that makes you to take action, thinking that you're actually helping, but in reality you're actually being scammed. Another thing that we are concerned about is privacy infringements, which are rife. So a malicious actor could use the deepfakes to send information to your peers and colleagues about you. And essentially, this is a forgery or replication or imitation of what you've been saying, but you've not actually said it. And it could cause deep embarrassment and harm, especially in this age where doxing is a thing, when someone goes viral and what they've done is not exactly favorable. It's very hard to debunk that deepfakes are indeed fake. So by the time a lie has taken one trip around the world, the truth is just putting its pants on. The other thing is the burden of providing credible evidence and proof. This has exponentially increased or will exponentially increase. Audio and video have long since been used to provide irrefutable evidence of criminal activity. So what happens here is that the truth is not really the truth anymore, and seeing is not believing either. So what is it? This essentially means that forensics professionals will have a very steep climb ahead of them to prove that a deepfake is a deepfake. And in the same vein, legal professionals will have to work with them and work extra hard to prove that the evidence provided is also not a deepfake. So it's kind of a paradox. Now, I should point out that while it all sounds like doom and gloom and total anarchy is looming, fear not. It's a major concern, yes, but we are still some way from realizing the full potential of the technology. It's not easy to create a deepfake. It takes hours and hours of production, and it is quite resource intensive, because the better the deepfake, the more processing power you require to train the artificial intelligence on the images and angles of the subject to provide a convincing output. In the same vein, audio is a lot more difficult to produce than video, and this is still evolving. Now, I know I mentioned in the beginning that there are applications available to the public to produce deepfakes. These are mostly lightweight services and are not intended to provide a full spectrum of what a real deepfake can do. So we refer to them mostly as Photoshop 2.0 types. And what they do is produce a convincing output, but to the trained eye, and you yourselves can actually develop the skills to do this, it is still possible to tell that it's a fake. So an example that I can give here is eyebrow movements or twitching of the eyes. Usually when there are those glitches that present themselves in those videos, those are some of the things that you can actually pick on to tell or to try and determine that a deepfake is a deepfake. At the same time, though, because the technology is definitely evolving, when reports of glitches with eyebrows and facial expressions and eye expressions, when that was released as research, the developers of deepfake technology went back and improved their design to be able to fix that problem. So this is where we talk about technology essentially chasing its tail in terms of regulation and the types of tools that are going to be used to detect deepfakes. They're trying to catch up to each other, but at the end of the day, one is always at the front of the race. So yeah, in that same vein, there are many research centers around the world that are dedicating massive amounts of funds and time to develop technology that can detect deepfakes. So the industry is really still evolving. So what does the future look like? The evolution of deepfake technology, of course, coupled with technology designed to detect deepfakes, is an area that is it's still evolving. Which develops faster is, of course, as good a guess for you as it is for me. But so far, the development of deepfakes seems to be at the top of the leaderboard. On the legal front, there are debates about how enforcement of regulation or laws on the use of deepfakes could play out. There could be several infringements on free speech and expression or the privacy rights of human beings if laws are poorly designed. And it might not even be practical to just slap a general deepfake ban because it's quite difficult to enforce, especially now with the anonymity and borderlessness of the internet. So what we might be seeing in the future is big tech platforms, for example, Facebook, Google, Twitter, essentially including checking mechanisms at their back-end systems to include checks for deepfakes. And what this means is that when you upload videos or audios to the platform, it re-encodes it just as it does for the videos that are uploaded now, so that when the video is uploaded, the idea is that deepfake checking mechanisms should be included as well. So what can you do as an individual? How do you contribute to this conversation? As programmers, the opportunities are looking like they're very endless. And if artificial intelligence is of an interest to you as a career, or data science or analysis, it would be great if you can contribute to the conversation at that level and lend your skills to it. Decide which side you want to be on. as human beings, it's important to develop and maintain critical thinking aspects, even as we interact on the internet. Trust but verify is a very common tagline in security, and it cannot be overemphasized. While data and its use is a hot commodity, so are perceptions, influence, and thoughts. And the data that you create, combined with who you are now as a human being, that is actually the main commodity. So, yeah, with that, I can open up to any questions if you have any. So looking at some comments. Feel free to ask any questions on the Q&A. At the same time, you can find me on LinkedIn, Amelia Goa. So one question, what's the likelihood of actors being replaced, as you mentioned? It's a great likelihood, and it's something that is definitely being explored for the simple reason that, for example, in Chadwick's case, they do want to have continuity of the franchise under his name. But at the same time, people do wonder whether it's worth continuing and not just letting him rest. So they've done it before, especially with Paul Walker with the Fast and Furious thing. And the way that they applied it then was a bit crude because the technology hadn't really evolved at that time. But now that it is, and they're using more generative modeling, the likelihood of actors being, well, maybe the ones that have passed on as opposed to the ones that are currently living. I think that's the main distinction that you want to create here. For the ones that are currently living, for them to be replaced might obviously cause them to lose their job, though I think then you'd be going into legal forms of royalties for what they're owed because you're still using their likeness. So you wouldn't use their likeness and not actually pay them what they're owed. So that's more a contractual issue. For editing purposes and improvement purposes, it definitely becomes easier instead of spending tons of time in something like Photoshop or whatever they use in the movie industry. Obviously, it's more advanced than that, but the equivalent of a tool like that definitely becomes replaced by defect technology because then you can perform something that's better to the likeness of the actor. So there's two parts to that question, and I hope I've answered that. So another question, as a normal SNS user, it would be nice to have the platformer to provide verification. Do you think it is doable? I think it is, but that again goes into how do you compel the platforms to include these types of things? What's the incentive for them to do it? To get them to already have discussions about fake news and what they can do to improve their algorithms to take down a lot of this information is already hard enough. So yes, in the future, I think we will be relying on them more to improve these checking mechanisms. Whether they work well is another question entirely, because algorithms always fail. And at this point, deepfake technology has definitely evolved to a point where the people developing the checking mechanisms and such is still lagging behind. So I think it is doable, but it hasn't evolved as much as we think it has. So one of the possible harms that deepfakes could do to everyday people in their lives. One of the examples that I gave here is the use for social engineering. So at the scale that we are now, social engineering is one of the most effective ways to scam people and commit financial fraud. So currently, we're seeing people who are being contacted by people pretending to be colleagues or relatives. At the same time, people are also falling victim to SMSs that take them to websites and essentially harvest their credentials and then proceed to, scam them out of their banking information and pull out the money from their bank accounts and such. So with deepfakes, it makes it a lot harder for everyday people to detect that they're being scammed. Imagine you are talking to someone, you receive a call from someone, a relative might be sick or purporting to be sick, and is telling you, I need you to help me to send money or wire or transfer some money to this account so that I can, go in for surgery or buy medication because I'm almost dying. So with scamming, they leverage making you do urgent actions, and the fact that someone has presented themselves with a life-threatening issue, that would essentially make you act on it. At the back of your mind, you don't stop to think that you should verify who this person is. It sounds like the person. The inflections are the same as the person that you think you know, but it's actually not the same person. So without you stopping to check and verify, which is why we talk about trust but verify, instead of you stopping to actually think about, would this person be contacting me? Would I be the first person that they contact? Or am I actually speaking to the right person? You wouldn't do that. You'd essentially go into your account and wire the money as soon as possible because you want to help them, right? But that's not exactly the case. So that's one way that it definitely presents itself. The other way is with privacy, and I think I've touched on this a little bit in the presentation as well. So essentially, anybody could take your voice or your face and slap it onto anything, any image, and present as you. So a video could or audio could make its rounds on the internet or even go viral. And this would be purporting to be something that you've said, but it's actually not you. That infringes on your privacy because they've taken your likeness without your consent and used it for nefarious purposes. So how can we force Facebook to check before spreading deepfakes? That's an interesting question, and I think it goes in line to something that we talked about earlier. Unless there's some regulation or an understanding or a technological code of conduct that all these big tech companies can agree to, it becomes really difficult to hold them to account to enforce these checks. And even then, with the algorithms that they try to develop to detect the deepfakes, this technology to detect the deepfakes hasn't exactly evolved to the same level. So it's definitely a conversation to be had, and I think more than slapping random bans and trying to enforce specific laws, because laws are always behind technology anyway, it that conversation has to bring big tech people to the conversation, to the table, so that what's the lay of the land can be understood, and more importantly, the harms on society or everyday people that are using these technologies. Otherwise, then we're just shouting into the vacuum or the vortex, and we're not really doing anything. So the conversation has to evolve. This is not an area that is truly and well advanced. I think only now, or at least in the recent 2 years, are people starting to take notice of the situation. There's lots of research centers in the US. The US government as well has started to take notice, especially in the light of the previous elections. There's a ton of stuff, especially where political propaganda is concerned, where deepfakes could come in handy and could be exploited. So because of that and the damage that it can do to democracy, a lot of governments are definitely taking note. Are there any working groups to establish security or verification for authentic versus non-authentic digital assets? And in this case, video, though equally audio. Yes, there are. There are some working groups, more in the sense of academia, lots of researchers. There's the University, I think, of Montreal, which has the most advanced, I think, AI department. There's Stanford University, there's Carnegie Mellon as well. A lot of researchers and professors in these universities have basically got together to try and not just identify ways in which AI and deepfakes could be used, but there's also the other side of it, where they are developing the technology, or at least trying to develop the technology to do this verification and identification to make sure that you can detect the deepfakes. So it's an area that needs a lot of work. There are no specific answers just yet. The main disadvantage or the main problem that people are finding right now is that the technology for video to detect fake videos has developed a lot faster than the one for audio. And the main reason for this is because with video, you have a wider source material to verify from. So if you have a celebrity, for instance, that has a lot of pictures and video of real stuff, so you have a source actor who has real content that can be used to develop or train the AI to tell it that this is the real person, and any deviation from this real person and their facial expressions or their mouth movements would be a fake. So in that sense, video is a bit easier. Well, I won't say easier, I'll put that in quotes because it's evolved faster. Audio has been a bit more difficult, but that is also an area that is moving, because they are finding out that the audios are used more for scamming as opposed to the videos. So the videos are a lot better for propaganda, but where scamming and social engineering is concerned, they use the audios. And with the audios, what the deepfakes do is cloud it in a lot of noise so that it's a lot difficult for someone to pick up on whether it's fake or not. So if you do remove the noise from that audio snippet that you have, then it's easier to pick up that the voice is fake. But because the people that are developing the deep fakes do realize that it's easier for you to pick up on that, they then mask the audio in a lot of noise, just so that it's a lot harder for the lay person to pick up. To the trained ear, you might be able to pick it up a lot easier, but to someone that does not work in security or does not really interact with any of the emerging technologies and is not really keeping abreast of any of this stuff, but just lives their life day to day, it's a bit more difficult for them. So these are some of the tips that some people can develop, or some skills that people can develop. But as I said, it's always evolving. So at some point we might feel like we're chasing our tails, but that's what technology does. It evolves, and so do we. How do you think the legal frameworks that are in place interact with the current trends, and possibly practical approach that you have encountered and areas that need to be improved? Yeah, honestly, I don't think legal frameworks are capturing the current trends. And even though there is work, there are lots of working groups and internet governance societies that are meeting to talk about all of this stuff, I am not sure that it's going in the right direction. People cannot agree. This is why I talked a little bit when I was answering past questions about, excuse me, bringing big tech to the table. The most recent thing, or the most recent debate, has been bans and laws on deepfakes. But there's, aside from the fact that there are going to be some constitutional questions around enforcing those bans and laws, it is not going to be practical to issue a ban, because how do you attribute a deep fake to someone? So you're essentially just playing a game of whack-a-mole. So if we haven't figured out already without the deep fakes how to attribute and follow the line of what people are doing with the way that things are anonymized and how borderless the internet is, it also becomes a bit difficult to slap a ban on the thing. So yeah, it's chasing the tail. It's an evolution type thing, but I don't know that we have any actual legal frameworks in place that will capture capture the spectrum, excuse me, capture the spectrum of what these emerging technologies are supposed to do. That would be the short answer. What are your thoughts about the comparison between video deepfakes and VR, AR interaction and data injections? Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's something that I'm actually doing a bit of research on. So unfortunately, I do not have a specific answer for you, because as of now, that research that we're doing, at least internally where I work, it's a little bit, I don't want to say it's classified, but it's not evolved to the place where I can give my actual thoughts on it. The differences, though, would lie in the types of neural networks that all of these technologies sit on. So Yeah, with the video deepfakes, VR, data injections, they all have underlying foundational artificial intelligence modeling or prototypes that they all sit on. That would be the main difference. Their usage, though, is also slightly different, and that is probably the part where we're most interested in the use cases and usability of those different technologies. So, yeah, I'll just say that that's an evolving area of research for myself as well, but I'm happy to have that conversation when we have developed our research internally a little bit more. That's a conversation that I'd really like to have. So let's put a pin on that question and take it up soon. Is any detection solution for the deepfake issue in real time proposed so far? For example, to be applied in video calls? Yes, there are some solutions that are being trialed by academia. I think it's the University of Stanford that might be trialing it. But yes, there are detection solutions that are in play. Whether they've been deployed on a larger scale or not remains to be seen, because there's still tweaks and things that they want to incorporate in that solution. But there are different companies backed by academia and also the US government that are looking into those detection solutions. So they do exist, not that they don't, they definitely do exist. But yeah, I don't think they're out commercially just yet in the full spectrum. So that was the last question. Thank you all for joining. And if you'd like to chat further, I will be, I think, in the lounge. I'm starting to get a feel of AirMeet, which I think is a really cool tool. So yeah, looking forward to meeting some of you in person also at some point. But yes, thank you for joining us today.